Hello everybody, welcome back to the Vintage Workshop. My name is Jeff Heath. In the last video, right at the end, I kind of threw out a little teaser there, trying to contain my excitement a little bit, and what you see here to the left of me is my latest and greatest acquisition. For those of you who don't know, this is a Yates American 1931 Y30, that's the model number, 30-inch Snowflake bandsaw. This has been my holy grail of machine quests for quite some time, so if I seem just a little bit over giddy, guys, I apologize. This is a very, very exciting acquisition for me. To give you the backstory on this, about 17, 18 years ago, really about 20 years ago, 20, 21 years ago, I got my first taste of old vintage American-made industrial woodworking equipment and began deciding that I was going to replace every machine in my shop with vintage machinery. And I think I told that story before, so I'll save you the rest of it. About 17 years ago, I met a machinery dealer that's relatively local to here, about an hour south down in DeKalb, Illinois. Many of you probably know him, Ben Rock at Pleasant Street Machinery. At the time, I was purchasing a Northfield joiner from him and hadn't got into restoring things myself. I was too busy with my work. I just wanted a complete machine. He had one ready to go. When I went to his shop to make the acquisition, he had one of these, which is his machine, which he still owns today, completely, fully restored, and I just stood there looking at it in awe, because it was basically the nicest looking bandsaw I'd ever seen. And after having a really good conversation with Ben and doing some investigating on my own, I pretty quickly found out that this is one of the top 2 or 3, and that's debatable, but one of the top 2 or 3 bandsaws that was ever made. The quality of this machine is amazing, and at that time I just decided I gotta have one. Little did I know, 17 years later, I would get a email out of the blue from someone who had one. Steve Manning, who was a fellow member of the OWWM community, had one of these sitting in his barn down in Alabama, and finally came to the conclusion that it would be really a long time, in his words, before he ever got a chance to do anything with it. And he already had a Fane-Egan, or a Tanowitz bandsaw that was working perfectly in his shop. So he decided to go ahead and relinquish this one over to me, and sent me an email giving me first dibs on it, which I thought was just absolutely outstanding. On our forum over at OWWM, we have a forum called the Boyd section, which is where you can place for sale items for vintage tools and parts, as well as wanted to buy ads. And I've had an ongoing wanted to buy ad that I re-up every few months for one of these for as long as I've been on the forum. So at any rate, getting back to this, so I made the acquisition with him. I just bought it immediately, no squibbling. I just wanted it. These guys are pretty rare for those of you who don't know, and just had to have it, so here it is. And I'm really excited to have it. It's one of the older ones, 1931, is right at the beginning, early of when they started actually making these, meaning Yates American. And what I want to do right now is kind of go through just a little bit of the details. The reason why they call it a snowflake is right here, guys. This is an aluminum front and rear guard that has the snowflake pattern cast into it. Can't even tell you how difficult of a casting that is to make. We've had a couple of members try to replicate them, and big problems with casting crackings and such forth. But at any rate, one of the great things that makes these old vintage machines so awesome to use is their mass in cast iron. Cast iron absorbs a tremendous amount of vibration, way more than regular steel does. And this machine in the bandsaw realm, for a 30-inch machine, is just massive. Guys, it weighs just under 2,800 pounds. I believe the shipping weight from Yates American in the back of the brochure is 2,750 pounds, not including crating. That's the actual weight of the machine. This particular machine has upper and lower aluminum wheels with cast iron hubs, and one of the things that is completely overbuilt about this machine, which is what also makes it kind of really nice to have, is the way that these tires, the way that the wheels are mounted to the shafts. This is a direct drive saw, and what that means is that the lower motor, which is mounted in the back here, which I'll show you guys in a minute, is connected to a shaft which mounts directly to the lower wheel, and that's what drives the whole machine. And the band saw blade, like other band saws, will go ahead and traverse up and drive the upper wheel. So what is so crazy about this particular saw is the collet system that they use for mounting the saws. I'm personally not familiar of another saw that went through the trouble of using a collet system to align and mount with a taper and lock on the wheel. Some of these bandsaws have collets upper and lower. My particular bandsaw, being an early one, just has a collet for the lower wheel. And what I've done is I've taken some video of removing the lower and upper wheels, because on these sometimes it can be quite the chore. So what I'm going to do next is show you that footage that I've already taken, because the first thing I did was start disassembling the saw with the wheels to get those off, because those are going to need to be rebalanced, cleaned up really well, and then I'm going to get new tires on them, get them crowned, and that's really the really most, I mean, it's all important, but that's a really big important part of how well the saw performs, is having good balanced wheels with a properly crowned and evenly adhered rubber tire on them, so that the band is not bouncing and jumping all over the place. So let's go ahead and show you that footage. Before I cut to that footage, I also wanted to just show you a little bit of the setup that I used for yanking those wheels off. As you could see in the upcoming video, the video has the wheels, the upper and lower wheels from the manufacturer, have two threaded holes for the purpose of being able to use a puller. So what I did was I grabbed a couple of 3/8 bolts that I had in my over in my hardware rack there, and this is my bearing splitter setup. And having a bearing splitter is critical when you need to get behind something that is pretty tight, tightly positioned to the rest of the machine behind it. And being able to get a thin bearing splitter like this, as you guys can see, and being able to clamp it around the back side and then being able to attach the puller to it is quite often the only way you're ever going to get a component off of one of these machines apart. The size of these bolts does not fit with my splitter, and I do have a metal lathe, but I have it set up right now because I'm making bored out shafts for another machine that I have, and because of it I have to make quite a few of them, and I didn't want to mess with that setup because I've got it all dialed in. So I just took these bolts, and as you can see, I literally just ground down about 1.5 inches of the length so that it fits into the splitter head. And this is the part of the puller that is going to be used with the pulling system to be able to get those wheels off. So I just wanted to show you this so that you knew exactly how I did it. Okay, this is our setup for removing the lower bandsaw wheel on a Yates American Y30 Snowflake bandsaw. Got the puller hooked up, got to push on the collet, not the center hook. So let's see how we do here. Wow, that is on there good. There it comes, just like that. Booyah! Can't believe I said that. All right, that wasn't so bad. We can do this without dropping it on our feet. Oh, that sucker's heavy. All right, one down, one to go. So here I have, now that the bottom wheel is removed, I've got the bearing puller now attached to the shaft, and what we're going to be doing is pulling off the collet that mounts the wheel to the bottom motor shaft. So as you can see, this is a bearing splitter, not your typical 2 or 3 jaw puller. What I'm doing is I'm getting good purchase behind the collet and then sliding it off the shaft by pushing on the shaft, or at least I hope I am. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out and then get in there and let you guys see what's going on. See if we can't get this to move. These collets are insanely expensive, so I definitely do not want to wreck it. It's coming right off. I sprayed it with Croil penetrating fluid, and, well, I shouldn't have said that. Now it's getting stiff. Got to be careful of the brake mechanism so that the splitter doesn't get behind part of that. I think we got it. Maybe not. Gets loose and tight. Sorry about my arms, guys, but I gotta get this thing rigidly held. It's keyed on. All right. Success. There it is. It's completely gunked up, but we got it off. So I want to test that shaft because when I fired this motor up, there was some run out on the bottom wheel. It was vibrating. Not excessively, but more than I want to see. In fact, I don't want to see any. So I'm going to go ahead and put a test indicator on this and see what's going on with the shaft here, or perhaps if it was just something on the mount. Okay, I'm hoping you guys can see this pretty well and there isn't too much glare. I've got the dial indicator on the shaft. After cleaning all the crap off of it, I took a Scotch-Brite pad with a little bit of Croil and just rubbed it very lightly, not being abrasive, just to get all the dried on crust that was on the shaft off. And I am elated to show you this. I'm spinning the shaft by hand, and I'm going from the keyway all the way back around the keyway, and I mean, that was less than half a tenth. This is a thousandths indicator, so it's barely moving at all, just a little bit of bumps and stuff that I really didn't clean off too well on the shaft. So I can't tell you how happy I am. So that just tells me that it's either gunk on the hub or gunk on the collet, gunk being a technical term for crud. So at any rate, this is good news for me. I know I don't have a shaft problem, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed with taking this apart. So as you can see, we're looking up. This is a really tall saw for a 30-inch saw. So at any rate, what I wanted to do is, you know, I showed you the pulling of the lower wheel. The lower wheel shaft has a capture nut which clamps the wheel onto the collet. And here's that capture nut, and that's left-handed thread, and I just used a spanner wrench to get that off. I did not show that in the video. The upper wheel, on some of these, has the collet system similar to this, in fact the same. On the older ones like mine, and several others that we know about from other OWWM members that I know who have these, who have chimed in on the thread that I've got going on the forum about this particular saw, and they stated that their upper wheels were pretty much set up the exact same way as mine. I want to open this up and show you inside here. This is the shaft. As you can see, the wheels are already off. I've got those sitting over there. I'm getting ready to crate those up and get those up to Bobby at Woodworkers Tool Works up in Wisconsin. I'm going to go ahead and post a link to his website, guys. If you guys are looking for bandsaw tires, for the right guides, pretty much everything. Bobby's a 5th generation owner of a service called Woodworkers Tool Works that has been serving the woodworking community for eons. You can get planer blades, planer knives. He does sharpening. He makes custom pretty much everything for industrial machines. So if you guys are looking for saw blades, I mean, I pretty much buy all of the things that I need to purchase, like tires and guide parts and stuff like that, from Bobby. He's an invaluable source. He also makes saw blades. He made a custom saw blade for me for a Greenlee saw that had a funny arbor size that I couldn't get from anybody else without having it custom punched out. So just a lot of stuff. And like I said, in the description, if you guys need his information, I will go ahead and post a link to that. And there'll be more about that when we discuss getting the tires installed on the wheels. At any rate, back to coming up here. This is just a normal right-hand thread, and this was on really tight because, you know, this machine had been sitting in a barn, and I have no idea how long it had been since the last time it had been run. As you can see, there's a lot of surface rust all over it, which is, you know, pretty common for the machines that I find. 1 5/8 wrench, just took it on here, and I was basically holding onto the wheel with one hand, and I stuck a block of wood in here. You don't want to put a lot of pressure on these. These things are very easy to crack because they're aluminum and they have weak points everywhere where the webbing is. In fact, this particular machine, and I'll zoom in on it, it came this way, has a pretty nasty crack here that I'm going to have to deal with. This being aluminum, I'm going to have to figure out learn and figure out the best way to get it welded so that this is rigidly held to get back together again. I've got a lot of experience welding steel and cast iron. I have zero experience welding aluminum. I've never done it. It's my understanding that TIG welding is probably the best way to go here. If you guys anybody has a lot of experience with that sort of welding, please go ahead and leave that information in the comments. This is roughly about 1/4 of an inch thick, and the crack is pretty good. It's about 7-8 inches long this way, and about 2 inches across one of the webs. So and it's right where the mounting bolt is, which kind of, you know, scares me a little bit. So I definitely got to get this right. At any rate, so I took the wrench on here and needed to get it loosened up. I sprayed the heck out of it with Croil, which is pretty much my go-to for penetrating oil, and I literally just gave it one hell of a whack. One good smash with the, actually going the other way, one good smash with a dead blow hammer, and it broke free after a good 15-20 minute soak with the Croil. And then I just was able to get it off and pull the top wheel. The top wheel is also a taper, but so then I used the puller exactly the same way on this upper wheel as I did the lower wheel. I didn't think it was necessary to show the same thing twice. So that's that. This is the entire upper shaft assembly up here, and what I've yet to discover, there's two different types of setups from what I've been told from the guys who have already been into these saws. One is a single row Timken bearing, which is, you know, reasonably priced as far as replacement. The other one is a double set of double row Timken bearings, which from what I understand get pretty expensive. I've heard prices thrown out there in the $1,000 to $1,200 range to replace them. So could get a little bit expensive, but this saw is worth it to me. And what I plan on doing is doing a absolute complete tear down, every nut and bolt, the motor, the whole 9 yards. We're going to get it completely apart, clean everything up. We're going to assess as we go what needs to be replaced, what needs to be repaired. We're going to take these bearings out and replace them, unless there's evidence that they were recently replaced, which I seriously doubt, because there's no evidence that this has ever even been removed, this assembly. There's no markings anywhere on any of the bolts. So more than likely we're looking at, you know, just a full rebuild of the upper cartridge here, as well as taking the motor apart down below and replacing those bearings. Those should be normal, regular size 62 series bearings, but 62 or 63, I'll find out more about that once I get into that. And let me back you out a little bit, and I'll show you the lower wheel assembly with the braking system. So Yates American basically spared no expense when it came to the cool factor on these machines. Seriously heavy duty casting. This is all part of the frame here. These doors have been referred to as tombstone doors because of their shape. And when you open the lower assembly, as you can see, I put a couple of protective boards down there so that when I popped off the lower wheel, I didn't end up banging it onto the concrete. This is a handbrake, and I know a lot of guys who have installed electric brake systems on these, but you know, I'm going to go ahead and give it a go with the handbrake and keep it original for now. As long as this is working, get into these pads. They look decent, but like I said, I won't know until I take it apart, clean it. As you can see, everything's pretty rusty. So I got to get this whole thing taken apart. I got to figure out if any small parts are missing. I got to figure out what needs replacing and what just needs a good cleanup. We're going to rewire the whole saw. The original starter, or at least what I believe is the original starter, just because of it's the same color as everything else, is right here. I went ahead and wired up the motor just to briefly start it up to see how it sounded. Motor runs great. The starter is screaming, barking, spitting sparks and stuff. There's evidence of electrical sparking inside the box. It's basically shot. I'm sure somebody could probably rebuild this completely. That's not my cup of tea. I'm just going to get a new starter. In fact, I've got several sitting up on the shelf that are candidates for this particular saw. I'm just going to find one that is vintage correct and get it on here. So yeah, I mean, for right now, this is pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and tip you up here. You know, one of the really desirable features about this saw is the really nice high resaw capacity with the guide all the way completely up. This saw has about an 18-inch capacity for resawing, for making veneer and stuff like that, and that's what makes it extremely appealing to me for book matching doors and stuff like that. You get a nice thick piece of crotch wood and you want to make all your doors on a cabinet set or a piece of furniture all look the same. You can slice your own veneer with a saw like this. So it's a very nice feature to have, having that big you know, resaw capacity. My old bigger saw was a 36-inch Northfield. Very nice saw. Went too fast for me, and on top of that, it only had about a 13-inch resaw capacity, and it was a bigger, more massive saw. Had a 36-inch wheel, but didn't have the resaw capacity. So we're going to get this baby completely torn apart, and I'm going to be doing a video series on this so that you guys can go along with me and hopefully enjoy the ride as much as I'm going to. We're going to get on this right away. I know I told you guys about the lathe rebuild, and that is going to continue on. There's going to be times when I'm going to be waiting for parts and components that I'm replacing on this, and while I'm waiting on that stuff, I will be jumping on the lathe. So we're basically going to be having two machines going at once here. So bear with me in my excitement, guys. I hope you guys are looking forward to watching these videos on the restoration and revival of just one of the finest old bandsaws that's ever been made in the history of our planet. So for now, thanks for watching, and please leave comments. If you guys have any comments regarding the aluminum welding, I would love to hear from you with regards to your thoughts on that. And also hit that like button, and if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. There's going to be a lot more to follow. So for now, I'm Jeff, and thanks a lot for watching the Vintage Workshop.